I think I figured it
Good?
out. Yeah. Okay, so first, can I have your name, yours at USC, and area of research, and what you do here?
Okay. Do I look at the camera or you?
Oh, you can look at me, or we can face outwards. It doesn't really matter. And don't worry about saying like,
All right.
whatever, you can always edit things out.
All right. Cool. So my name is Joe Jones. I'm a faculty in environmental health sciences, and I'm faculty principal at Green Quad at USC. And I've been in a faculty position here for 7 years.
Okay. And first question, how often do you buy fish? Like at a market or at a store? Or...
How often do I buy fish? Very infrequently. I would say once a month
Okay.
at most.
And what is your definition of sustainable fisheries?
A sustainable fisheries to me is a fisheries that is harvested in a manner so that particular stock will be present in the future. And the rule of thumb that I use in my class is that a fisheries is harvested at 50% of their carrying capacity. And part of the problem is we don't really know the carrying capacity for a lot of stocks, so they tend to be overfished. But as a general rule of thumb, it's a fisheries that should be around in the future.
Okay. And do you know any restaurants locally that use sustainable fisheries or buy from sustainable fisheries?
Certainly. I can think of 4 of them off the top of my head. One is Bon Swan, the Thai restaurant over on Blossom Street. The chef there, Alex, is a good friend of mine, and he has a very strong emphasis on sustainable fisheries. There's also Terra in West Columbia off of State Street. The chef there, Mike Davis, is very into not only sustainable fisheries, but also supporting South Carolina fisheries. So he gets a lot of material from South Carolina fishermen. Third one is Blue Marlin over on, what is that, off of Trevay Street over in Vista. I don't know the current chef there, but the former chef, Brian Dukes, the son of the owner, very, very strong sustainable seafood emphasis. And they actually have it on their menu. If you go there on the front page, I forgot the name of it, but they're certified by the group that works with the Monterey Bay Aquarium. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. They really support sustainable fisheries, especially because they do Blue Marlin. I mean, they emphasize seafood, so they have a lot of like shrimp and grits and flounder and stuff like that, crab, she crab soup, stuff like that. And that's a very strong focus for them. The last one is Motor Supply Bistro, also in Vista. Eddie Wales, the owner there, just hired a new chef, Wes Fulmer, and he was trained, I believe he was trained at Johnson, I think it's Johnson and Wales is the culinary school in Charleston. And Wes is really into sustainable seafood, and that's kind of his forte. So it's kind of in reverse order in terms of strengths. Motor Supply has a really strong sustainable seafood emphasis. Blue Marlin also, followed by Terra, and then Bon Swan. So those are 4 of, to me, the nicer restaurants in Columbia. And it's one of the things that people ask about is where their seafood comes from, because people are becoming more aware, like the shrimp trawl. You know, it damages the habitat. It's not just it kills turtles and dolphins, but trawling itself really destroys the ocean floor, which when you destroy the ocean floor in that way, it's hard for it to recover. And that's one thing people are being more aware of is the environmental footprint of their food choices.
Okay. And do you think aquaculture or aquaponics are viable options in the future for supplying fish?
Yeah, I think they, taking off my aquaponics instructor hat, I think they kind of have to be, because we've reached the point where most of the fisheries have been overfished, and if you want to have seafood as an option to eat, you're going to have to grow it somehow. You can look at any major fishery in the Atlantic or Pacific, and they're overfished. They're not coming back. Cod, bluefin tuna, swordfish, all the kind of standards that you see in the menu, just overfish. They're not going to come back. So if you want that option, you're going to have to grow them on land or in some kind of ocean netting system like they use off of British Columbia for the salmon. That said, there's some concern. There's also environmental concerns with that as well, because with aquaponics it's a little bit different, because the waste from the fish is used as nutrients for the plants. However, if you look at aquaculture by itself, a lot of the aquaculture, especially in a lot of Asian countries like Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, where a lot of the shrimp come from that are consumed in the U.S., they have a very big environmental footprint, because there's a lot of essentially waste, nitrogen, phosphorus waste that's produced in these aquaculture facilities that are just released into the local waterways. And that's, to me, there's no difference between a shrimp aquaculture facility in Central Asia and a cow confined animal feedlot in California.
Oh, wow.
They have the same kind of environmental impact. And that's one thing a lot of people don't realize is if you buy shrimp and it says, shrimp $3.99 a pound from Vietnam and shrimp from Charleston, South Carolina, $12.99 a pound. Well, I'm going to buy the ones that were brought in from outside the country because they're cheaper. But it's the same problem with confined animal feedlots is there's a cost that's being externalized, and it's externalized to the environment. And that's one thing people are more aware of, becoming more aware of, is where their food is coming from, and how their individual choice is very important.
Okay, and my next question is, we may have already covered this to a certain degree, but what is the largest issue you feel in the fisheries industry? What do you think is the worst thing that's going on now?
The worst thing in fisheries?
Yeah, or biggest current issue?
That's a good question.
And it can be broad if you don't want to get too specific, or it could be.
Let me think. I would have to say habitat damage, primarily from trawls. And I used to not think that, but when I was in California, I used to do a lot of deep sea work with remotely operated vehicles. And when we would work on the ocean floor, we were looking at whale skeletons and critters that live on them. But every now and then we'd just do a survey. We had a couple hours to kill, so we'd just do a survey. Because you already put the quarter in the video game, as it were, so that quarter being $25,000. So you got the ROV for the day, so let's go explore. And we would find trawl tracks, and it was so obvious when you're on the ocean floor. You're going and you see rocks and cnidarians and anemones and little fish and stuff. And you hit an area where it was trawled, and honest to goodness, it's like someone took a vacuum and just wiped the slate clean. There is nothing left in that area. No rocks, no cnidarians, no coral, nothing. You might see a little fish or two in there, but it was just wiped clean. And trawls are huge. They are, in terms of volume of seafood we consume, is over half of the seafood we eat. A lot of it's shrimp, right? That's how shrimp are caught. You see, the romantic pictures of the shrimp trawlers coming into Beaufort, and they got, the nets and the otter doors hanging off of them. But honestly, when those things are on the bottom, they're really damaging the environment. So a lot of shrimp fishermen are paying a lot more attention to how they harvest as well, trying to minimize environmental impact. But regardless, trawls, I think, are the biggest things. That and factory, factory ships. Those are awful. They just go out and, the thing is, you catch a tuna, and on the same ship, it ends up being in a can. So you have these, it's just, again, like confined animal feedlots. You have this huge monstrosity that is sucking in large schools of tuna, herring, mackerel, whatever, and just sucking them dry. And you can't do that to fishery stocks. If you beat the system down so far, they won't come back because you don't have any adults, right? You don't have anything to replace the previous generation. you have no one producing gametes to make those baby fish, so they're gone. So that's it.
And what do you think the future of fisheries is, or what trends do you see arising, or?
Yeah, that's, again, taking off my aquaponics hat. That said, I think aquaponics is going to play an important role because of the fact it conserves water and is using the waste from the animals as input for the plants. I think that is very important. Aquaculture is nice, but again, you're producing a lot of waste. And if you can take that waste and use it effectively, then I think that would be the most sustainable way. And again, that's kind of why I started teaching this class, is because I think aquaculture is not going to cut it. There's not going to be enough fish in the ocean to supply all the demand. So what's the answer? To me, at least, the short-term answer is aquaponics. And you can make it as big or as little as you want, but I think that flexibility allows people to kind of make it fit their needs. So if you're a big fisherman in Vietnam, you could do something. If you're some small person in a high school, you want to do it just to provide lettuce for your class of 10 students, you can do that too. So it's scalable, whereas aquaculture is not necessarily very scalable in some regards. So.
And the final two questions, I'm going to kind of combine them, but
Sure.
How big of an issue do you think education on sustainable fisheries is, like lack of education or lack of knowledge, and what do you think we can do to shift public perception of sustainable fisheries if you feel that is an issue?
Yeah, no, I think education is definitely an issue. I think it goes beyond fisheries. I think it includes all manners of food consumed, plant, animal, etc. It's just educating people about their food choices is the biggest thing. And with seafood, I think if you go to like Whole Foods has done a really good job in educating the public about different options. They have their red, their green, their yellow, kind of like the Monterey Bay Aquarium with their sustainability seafood app. I think those types of things, the trick is to get people to use it and think about it. You have to make it easy. You have to put it out there for them. So like at Blue Marlin, on the front cover of their menu, you see certified SC grown, sustainable fishery approved. Well, if you're Joe Blow and you've never thought about sustainable seafood and you're there getting dinner and you ask the waiter or waitress, you're like, what's the sustainable seafood initiative you're part of? That then opens the conversation, so that person who never knew about it says, oh, that's really interesting. I've never thought about where my shrimp comes from. And if the waiter or waitress is educated, which in those restaurants I talked about, they are, they'll say, oh, yeah, these shrimp from South Carolina are, white shrimp. We support the local businesses. Shrimp is very important for South Carolina. And then the flip side of that is imported shrimp is not so good for the environment. And you're essentially, by making that decision as to where your shrimp comes from, is important. And not just for the business or the chef at that restaurant, but also for the consumer. Because if the consumer says, I only want to eat South Carolina shrimp, then as a result, the restaurants will meet that need. Because if people come in and say, where are your shrimp from? Well, they're imported. No, I don't want those. And if you have enough people do that, and the restaurant owner and the chef will go, well, crap, no one's eating this imported shrimp. How do we meet that need? Well, start using South Carolina shrimp and advertise it and educate the public, and then people will start demanding it. And that's happening. South Carolina is kind of behind the curve on that, but when I was in Santa Cruz and Monterey, California, it was kind of the standard. Like, if I were to choose like tile fish for an entree, I asked the waiter would know exactly where that fish came from and could talk about the sustainability of it. And if they couldn't, I would not order it. And a lot of people are like that too. It's getting more and more like that here. Again, it has to do with people paying more attention to the food they eat and making sure it's sustainable, because I think a lot of people realize that, the world is changing. whether we like it or not. And if we want things to be around for our kids and grandkids, you have to do things differently. You just can't like eat it like it's going out of style, because, you know, when you're talking to your kid in 20 or 30 years, like, well, this is what a tuna looked like. We won't have them.
Yeah, wild to think about. But
It's true.
thank you
Yeah.
so much for
Yeah.
agreeing to do this. I
Yeah,
really
no problem. I appreciate it. And is this for Ryan's class?
No, Dr. Griffin's Marine Conservation, the other 599 course.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, we just have to make a video project.
Well, awesome.
Issue. Let's hope.
Well, good
this
thing I didn't say
camera-
anything embarrassing about him.
Do you know a lot of?
Nah, I only see him in
Okay.
faculty meetings. I don't.
Cool. I think this worked out.
Did it?
Yeah.